Okay, we'll start the agenda. The first item on the agenda is approval of minutes of our regular meeting of September 12th, 2022. Has everyone read those? Any corrections or omissions on our last month's meeting? No? I'm sorry.
She'll make sure.
Do you have any?
I didn't have any.
I didn't.
None? None. Chris? I don't have any either. So
Beautiful job.
Yep.
take a motion to approve last month's meetings, or last month's meeting, September 12th.
This is Elaine. I move to accept the minutes of the meeting of September 12th as written.
Okay, second,
Second.
Chris? All in favor?
I
Aye. Opposed? All right. Minutes are accepted. Public comment. There's no public comment that I know of. You know of any?
Karen would have it.
That's correct, Bill. There is no public comment tonight.
All right. John, report of the zoning enforcement officer.
Good evening, everyone. John Cody. Yeah, just like to start off, we have two houses presently sitting in wetlands. They'll be doing their site walks prior to the 27th or 28th. So those I expect will get approved. Also had two, possibly three new people looking for land in town. They're doing their research. I believe one of them was purchased and that should be in the works coming up. Additions, we've got plenty of those going on. It was actually kind of slow the last week and a half. It kind of settled down finally. It's about time. As far as permits and all that, that pretty much sums all that up. I would like to have, when we get to the discussion on the zoning regulations for the non-conforming, if the commission would give me the ability to speak during that, I'd appreciate that.
Can we do that?
You can ask me questions, why not?
Can you ask a?
I mean, I think it's kind of important that I state where we're coming from and how this transpired from the day it was created to where we are now.
Okay, it's okay with me. Should we, if John speaks?
Yeah.
What do you think, Jim? Elaine?
He's the EO. Yep.
No problem.
He has the opportunity
John.
to speak.
You're part of us.
Thank you.
All right. And that's your zoning enforcement officer report. Complete, John?
Correct.
All right, next, we have with us tonight Sam Dicka. And we're going to be receiving an application from him for to start the process for an outside pizza oven. And he applied for a special permit. And I was wondering, and maybe you would wonder too, do we think that he needs to have a special permit for a public hearing? Or could we just consider amending his current permit and adding the outdoor pizza oven to that permit? We don't have to decide that right now, but I think that we should, if we don't have to go through a public hearing and a special permit process and just add it to amend his existing permit, that would seem make more sense and be easier for all of us. So we have to, do we have any comments on that idea right now?
I'll comment, Bill.
Thanks, Jim.
It's definitely a change of use of his existing permit. And be careful you're setting precedents. The public hearing process is not that difficult. And it's definitely amending and changing of use. It should be pretty smooth. It shouldn't be an issue. And be careful of setting precedents.
Okay. So did we, with the distillery, did we amend permits for the distillery?
We had a change of use. or right?
And it was a public hearing.
And it was a public hearing.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So
Yeah,
for the
Bill,
time,
that's correct. The distillery did have several amendments. And
it had
as far as I
amendments.
can remember, there were public hearings involved.
Yeah,
Okay. All right, so for the time being, we'll receive Sam's application. And, but we should discuss it just a little bit right now because
I don't know if we can we?
we can discuss his application, can't we?
I'm asking Karen, actually. or
Um,
Jim.
We can discuss it to determine if it's complete and we have the information we need.
That's it.
Okay. Because I went down this afternoon
No,
and,
we can't talk about it.
oh,
We
can't
can
do it.
only accept the application.
All right, so we have to accept the application as a special permit.
Right.
And a possible public hearing. So that's the end of our discussion.
Right.
We can't discuss it any more than that.
So can we set a
Cover.
public hearing for it for next month?
You should.
Yeah. Karen, can we do that?
If you're deciding that it's an amendment to the existing special permit and that the amendment needs a public hearing, yes, you can.
But we also have to check the application out to make sure it's complete and satisfactory to us.
The application has to be complete by the public hearing.
By the public hearing or before we schedule it?
No, by the public hearing.
Okay, so any questions we have for Sam relative to his application, we have to have the answers to it by scheduling time next meeting?
Yeah, we'll be able to ask questions at the public hearing and then we'll have a discussion at the close of the public hearing.
All right,
And then we can make a decision.
okay, all right. So Sam, we're just going to accept your application now. Not accept it, we're going to receive your application.
Okay.
And we like the business you have there. So thank you for having that in Roxbury.
So then we'll have a public hearing in November on the 14th. Karen, does that sound good?
That's the next meeting date.
Right.
Yes, that's correct.
So that brings us to,
Just so Sam knows, he will have to notify all of the abutting property owners of that public hearing. And what we can do, Sam, we usually offer the public notice that goes in the paper to you ahead of that time in case you want to use that for your notice to the neighbors. So I'll talk to you about that.
And then, so there'll be a public hearing and then you'll be here to explain what you want to do.
No problem.
Okay.
I have no problem. All right,
Okay.
thank you. Thanks, guys.
You're
Bye.
welcome.
see you,
Bye,
Sam.
everybody.
Bye.
All right, next on the agenda is by Greg Kava. It's a request for a clarification of zoning regulations 310.6 and 310.7. And you probably all know Greg. Greg is a experienced land use attorney and a fellow Roxburian. And so Greg is here to discuss, like I said, 310.61 and 310.72. I just want to remind Greg and all of us that that we're not here to discuss an application, a particular application, but we're being asked to clarify a regulation.
Yes,
Right?
that's right. We don't have an application pending anywhere.
Okay, so Greg, I turn the floor over to you.
Thanks. It's funny. I've looked at this regulation 6 times a week. And when I first sat down to do a variance for Mr. DeMole's plan with the zoning board of appeals, I said, why are we going for a variance? because I think the way the regulation reads, it's not being interpreted correctly, because, John had told us that he didn't think that we were going to be able to do this because it was a lateral extension, or what do they call it? I guess a lateral expansion. And I said, but that's not what the regulation says. And I looked at it, and if you read this regulation, remember, when a court construes a regulation, they look at the words that were used by the commission. They do not look at the intent of the commission. The intent is irrelevant on Connecticut case law on these things, because they look only to the words that are used. That's how they construe statutes. That's how they construe municipal regulations. They treat them just like statutes. And so I said, well, let me read this. And it says that a legally non-conforming dwelling which fails to conform to any setback requirements may be expanded or enlarged up to a maximum of 25% of the dwelling's existing footprint. And it says it also is governed by 310.7. So that was 310.6. So I looked at 310.7 and I said, well, it says any increase in footprint within a setback line must be positioned behind the non-conforming dwelling. Well, wait a minute. Any increase in footback within a setback line, that means you're increasing the footprint of the house within the front yard or side yard or rear yard setback. That's when you've got the issue with no lateral extension, because it says for example, where a dwelling is located within the front setback, the addition must be behind the dwelling so that no portion of the expanded footprint laterally increases the setback nonconformity. So what this basically says is yes, if your entire dwelling, I don't know, here's your dwelling, here's the setback line, and here's the street. If the whole dwelling is within the front yard setback, you can't go lateral. You have to go back. Okay, that's what this is saying. But where in the case of my client and several other clients that I've had over the years, the dwelling straddles the setback. And so what they were proposing to do was put an addition over here within the setback, a lateral addition that was completely conforming to front, side, and rear yard setbacks. So it's not within the setback. And so I looked at the regulation. I said that should be legal, and it should be legal because you got to position it behind if there's an increase in footprint within the setback line. That means over here. Once you take it out of the setback, you can go laterally. And so I read it and I said, I think that's what it means. I think that's what it means. I think that's what it says, and therefore that's what it means. And so I think careful reading of 310.7 is it only applies to lateral increases within the front yard setback. And as long as you keep it behind the setback line, you should be able to go lateral on it. That's what the regulation, I believe, says. And so I took it up with Gail, and I think she agrees with me. Looking at what she had written, I think that Gail agrees with me that that's what the regulation means. And then there's another question I have, but I'll start with that one. So I don't know what to. I don't know what to say. I think that's the way the regulation reads, and I think council agrees with me.
So we will let John say something first, and then we can.
Yeah, please. Hello, it's John Cody once again. I'd like to backtrack a little bit on the history of this. Originally, when I had the Michael Zach versus Montesi problem about the screening, I was looking through the regulations and the special permit that was granted for that. The special permit said it shall be screened on 3 sides, north, south, and east, I believe, and screen all houses. State statute also does say that when you're making a decision, you need to go back and find all the information available to make a concise decision. So doing that, I did the research. I talked to members on the commission way back then, and it was determined that no, Mr. Zach was not included in that screening process when that was drafted. Looking at this regulation, which I agree does need to be clarified, we've had numerous cases of this non-conforming. They've gone to ZBA. I've done the same due diligence where I looked at the regulation and the intent of the regulation, because an intent is everywhere. It's 13 times in our regulations. It's in state statutes. It's everywhere. The intent, I'm sure you all will remember, we're all on the commission at that time, was to have the additions go straight back, no lateral expansion. So I based my decisions on those, sent multiple of them to the ZBA. They made decisions on that, pretty much stood by what the intent was. Here now it's being exposed where the verbiage is a little askew. I'm glad we could resolve this, but just to say once again, I went with the intent of the regulation as drafted, being part of the commission at that time. Therefore, I sent it to ZBA and sent all the others along that way.
Thank you.
Greg, you still have the floor.
John says intent. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. That's what the courts say. The courts say we don't look at we don't care what the commission has in mind. The question is, what did they draft? What does the regulation say? The court doesn't want to divine intent because intent doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is the language of the regulation. And this regulation very clearly only talks about prohibiting lateral expansions if they are within the setback. And so in these cases like this one and the one on 67 Battle Swamp and the others, those are ones that are not within they're lateral, but they're not within the setback. They're outside of the setback. And this, it would make no sense to require every addition to go out the back, especially when you consider that the only houses in town that are asking for this are antiques. Okay, these are old houses. And when they built a house in Connecticut, it had a chimney in the center. And they built one room on one side of the chimney. And then when the family expanded, they built a room on the other side of the chimney, and they probably went up to 2 stories. They may have started with 2 stories. Only did they go back when they had exhausted the sides, and then they went back. But they didn't go forever back because you need fireplaces. That's what heated the house. So you need it to be clustered around that chimney. And so if what we're trying to do is to preserve the appearance of Roxbury and avoid this, I'm looking at 71 South Street, which I think you're all familiar with, a house that is 500, I think I calculated it 530% is the addition compared to the house. It's a 530, 5.3 times the size of the original house. That's not a little addition tacked onto a house like most of the antiques in town are. That's a complete redoing of a house and doing it within the front yard setback. And it's just not, it just shouldn't have been, with this regulation, it never would have permitted it. But the point is, that's what you're trying to solve. But I think we've gone too far in saying that you can't expand laterally, because there's no reason why, if you've got the room laterally to go, as long as you're behind the setback, that you shouldn't be able to expand. I mean, they could move it 1 inch from the main house and they could build something 500 times the size of the house. But that's not what people want to do. They want to tack an addition onto their house. And I looked at a bunch of these, and I believe that most of the additions, tasteful small additions tacked on to the houses here, are lateral additions. Not all of them. Some of them go back too, but they also mostly go lateral. Prime example right down the street, Kenny Allen's house, built in I think it was 1810 or 1800. That house has a lateral addition, and the addition is larger than the original house. So that's a typical situation that you would see in Roxbury, is these lateral additions. And I don't think your regulation prohibits it. And that's why I'm looking for a clarification to see if we can't say, you know what, that's what the regulation says. And remember, you've limited it to 25%. So you're not going to get this under any circumstances. Are you going to get this if it goes lateral? What you'll instead get are typical houses that we've seen, like Kenny's, which looks like this. Hope you can zero in on that. As you can see, Kenny's got this, what appears from the front to be a small lateral addition. Most of the addition's behind the house, but a small portion of it's lateral. And this is what you get when you allow people to expand laterally: a very tasteful house with an addition that is lower roof. It's 1.5 stories versus 2 stories. And that's exactly what we were proposing to do in our case, was to take one that came way down on the roof line. It was below the level of the roof, and it was 1.5 stories. So it was, it really looked like from the front, it looks like one story with little eyebrow windows.
I'm drawing in there too.
Yeah, I do. I had it right here. I think it's upside down. There it is. So I'll show you guys. It's this addition right here that we propose to do. And from the front, this is what it looks like. So it's a lateral addition, but it's not, it's a tasteful addition. The addition is this part back here.
Should we be looking at this
No, this
tonight?
is not a.
No,
application, so-
I'm just saying that this is the type of thing that we're talking about. We're not talking about 71 South Street. And I think because remember, if this regulation had been in existence and they wanted to put this addition on, it wouldn't have come close to 25%. I mean, it's 20 times that much. And so that wouldn't have flown under this regulation. What you would have gotten was something like Penny Allen's house. So I think that I think that's why I don't think you have to worry about. I think you're reading it a little too strictly, and I think the problem is that's not what it says. And so I'd like to have you interpret it a different way. Also, I want to chat about the 25% issue. Because I'm told that you interpret that you can take the existing dwelling's footprint and you can enlarge it by 25% of that footprint. So if the house is 1,000 square feet and it's 2 floors, it's 2,000 square feet. You can only go 25% of the footprint of 1,000 square feet. That doesn't make any sense. All you're going to end up that way is having these tiny little additions, closets tacked onto houses. You can't put a decent room. Again, most of these houses are anywhere from the original house. It's hard to go back to the original house because by the time zoning came in, the house had been expanded and enlarged. But these are relatively modest houses, and a 25% of that is not going to quite be much larger than a generous closet.
Greg, let me
Greg, can
interrupt
I,
you for that because we have to just focus on this 25% is pretty black and white. We have to focus on the lateral expansion and not the, that's a different issue, the 25%. So I'd like to keep you on the floor, but now I'd like to open up the floor to the members.
Sure.
To
No
discuss
problem.
this.
Thank you.
John, during the discussion. Yeah, you won't be able to be part of the discussion as a zoning member, okay?
Sure, if you have a question, feel free to ask them.
What do you say?
If you have questions.
Yeah, you can ask me questions. I won't.
Yeah, we can. All right, so you stand by.
You got it.
can I,
All right.
can I speak, Bill?
Jim?
Yes. I'll make it brief. Prior to this amendment to the regulation, you could do nothing with a non-conforming house. If it was in front setback, side setback, you couldn't change it. They would go to the ZBA, and years back, the ZBA kind of allowed some things to happen, but the zoning board was no making a non-conforming structure more non-conforming than what it was. And it was explained to us that any addition would make it more non-conforming, whether it's in the outside of the setback or within the setback, it's more non-conforming. So then it was brought to our attention. There was an elderly couple, only had one bathroom upstairs, and they wanted to put a bathroom downstairs, obviously for good reasons. And they couldn't do it because you couldn't add on and bump out a non-conforming house. So we looked into that, and there's a young family that needed an extra bedroom. They couldn't do it. So the reason the 25%, you're right, Greg, they're small, but it was for a bathroom or one spare bedroom. It wasn't meant, the intent, I won't use the word intent, but it wasn't, as far as the commission, we didn't mean it for a full addition to the house. We just wanted to give people a bit of a chance to add on a spare bedroom or a downstairs bathroom. That was the intent of the regulation.
You want to say anything about the lateral?
We just, We, 25% of the footprint was enough to give them a extra bathroom or an extra bedroom.
Do you want to make
Not-
any comment on that wording in the regulation about going laterally?
We don't have that in our reg.
Yeah,
372. 31072.
You can go laterally, sorry.
Yes, once you're past the setback,
That's what we're.
you can go laterally.
so 31072, I'll read it. Is that all right?
Yes.
Sure, read it.
Okay, 31072 in our reg. Any increase in footprint within a setback line must be positioned behind the non-conforming dwelling, barn, or commercial building, or away from the affected property line with no lateral expansion within that setback. For example, where a dwelling is located within the front setback, the addition must be behind the dwelling so that no portion of the expanded footprint laterally increases the setback nonconformity. And that's the section that Greg is
Right,
to.
but
in the
keep in mind
discussion.
the 25% is not very large, but it's still 25% of the footprint.
But the 25% is not in question for tonight. It's actually the, that 31072 that's the one part, I think, that is in question that we have to discuss.
Well, don't we have to discuss intent also?
Oh,
Well, the word is
With-
in the definition.
The words in the definition, but this, I'm just saying that it all comes down to, you know, part of this. You want to say anything about
Well,
Gail's?
yeah, I do, because this is it. Just for the record, the commission received this correspondence from Gail of her interpretation of 31061 and 31072. And just for the record, I asked Kim to initiate the conversation with Gail. And that initiation created Gail's opinion memo. And that's what we're working with right now. So we have to deal with intent, and we have to deal with lateral expansion. That's what's out there right now that's pertinent. Do you agree? Those two things.
Yeah.
So let's start with intent. The section that says it is the general intent of these regulations that nonconformity shall not be expanded, that they shall change to conformity as quickly as possible. That's the statement. It is a general intent. Before that is even mentioned, in the beginning of the sentence, it says, except as expressly permitted by these regulations. So it's telling us that except as expressly permitted by these regulations has seniority or priority over the general intent, and it's spelled out. And it goes on to talk about expansion and talking about when there is an expansion, as if there could be or would be an expansion. It talks about applying for a special permit. And then it goes on with an example of where a dwelling is located within the front setback. The addition must be behind the dwelling so that no portion of the expanded footprint laterally increases the setback of nonconformity. The setback nonconformity ends if this is the house and if it's entirely in the front setback, there can be no lateral expansion. It allows you an expansion, but it has to go back. But if this 50-foot setback bisects the front half of the house, the back of the half of the house is out of the setback nonconformity. And therefore, anything going on back here would be out of the setback nonconformity. And therefore, it wouldn't be increasing the nonconformity because it would be outside of the nonconformity factor. So,
But does the fact that the front of the house has breached the non-conforming line?
well, that's what we're saying. We're saying,
That's what
it
we're
talks here.
That's what we're discussing.
Yeah,
Yeah, it says here, no portion of the expanded footprint laterally increases the setback nonconformity. So the setback nonconformity ends wherever the setback line is, no matter where the house sits on it. So the setback nonconformity ends wherever the setback, even if the, you know, if
I believe the structure is still non-conforming though.
it's a non-conforming structure, but it's not increasing the setback,
It's not increasing the
the
non-conformity.
non-conformity setback, because you're in a conforming area, conforming area now.
Remember, it's
That's-
legally non-conforming because it's not the house that breached the setback, it's the setback that breached the house. The regulation came after the house was built. So, and that's why it's legally non-conforming, which means it can't be disturbed.
Right. It's pre-existing non-conforming.
Pre-existing legally non-conforming, yes.
All right. Any comments from anyone else?
Well, this is Elaine Curley. 31061 is very clear. There's no ambiguity about 36101. The first one,
310-61.
yeah, 31061. There's no ambiguity. It's very clear. Limited right to expand a non-conforming primary dwelling. Okay. The 31072. Again, it's pretty clear what it states. The confusion comes in all the other regulations, how they relate to those two.
In what way? So what do you think 310-72 says?
Well, again, what Bill just said, we cannot increase the nonconformity. But it's inferred here that a lateral expansion would be allowed
Outside the setback.
outside the setback. That's what I'm getting out of this. And I read it like 12 times today too.
Every time you read it, it does come across clear. Any increase in the footprint within the setback line must be positioned behind the non-conforming dwelling or barn. Any increase in the footprint within the setback line.
Right.
But in the case of the house being within the front setback, there can be no lateral.
No, if the whole house is in the setback, yes. We're talking now about the setback line. And, you know, it's, you know, that first part of that sentence, paragraph 3-10-1, the very first thing it says, except where expressly permitted by these regulations. And then we go on, we state that the general intent of regulations, intent of this regulations not to expand the nonconformity. But prior to that, it says, except as expressly permitted in these regulations, which supersedes or overrides the next part of the sentence, because that first 7 words is a qualification that a permitted use of a non-conforming house, a non-conforming structure can be done as long as it's not increasing, it's not encroaching in the setback line. The setback line seems to be a basic premise we have to center on.
I think I'd like to raise a good point that this is all inclusive of the regulations of 3.10, and there's 12 regs within that. So I think that we really need to cover them all before we can make a statement.
Cover all the mentions.
The entire chapter. If you're going to,
No, you do have to
if
do that.
if you're going to 310.6, then you're going to 310.7, and take 310.7, he has 12 statements, 12 regs.
Oh, 310-7.
Right? Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
It has three.
3.
Yeah. So the three should be covered.
Explain that once more, Guy.
No, I understand what you're saying. So it says, the regulation says that
310.6 says it's dependent
on
upon
310.7,
310.7.
and there's 3 parts to
And there's three parts
310.7.
to three.
So we should, yes, just make sure that every piece to that is fitting. So,
310.7,
so it's 310.7, and then there's 1,
1,
2,
2.
and 3.
3 parts.
7.1's about the height, and I don't see how that applies.
Right, so that's right. Just, I think it's just making sure that things are,
That regulation on height, this is what they want. They want something that drops below the ridge line of the existing house.
Right.
As opposed to this that towers over the existing house.
totally aware, yeah.
It kind of repeats itself.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, so 1 is really not part of that. That's very clear as well. 2 is the one that's brought into question, and we'll just look quickly at 3.
So 1 is definitely out of the picture, right? That just
That's
deals with
that's
height.
straightforward.
So we don't deal with 1. 2 talks about the footprint. 2 talks about footprint. And 3 talks about historic barns.
three.
Excluding historic barns. It's about, they do not apply to accessory buildings.
All right,
And the fact that has the house been previously expanded, it's only allowed 1.
Right.
so 3 is not relevant,
We,
Just
well,
2.
we wouldn't,
just 2.
We need to just say it.
yeah.
Because for the public record, we need to, because it does say in the regulation that we are to look at 310.7, she's right. So we separate, Jim, you good with this?
Mhm.
Okay, Chris, just, public record, making sure.
Yes.
Okay. So we are back to 310.7.2. Jim, do you have any comments? We're gonna have to vote at some point
Vote on what?
on the meaning of this regulation.
consensus.
The consensus of what this means. To make sure that we're on agreement with the,
Well,
And-
I'm going back, years back, that I was always told any portion of a house that's non-conforming, that means the whole house is non-conforming. Didn't draw a line through the living room and the kitchen and yada, yada. The whole house was non-conforming if any portion was non-conforming. And you had a non-conforming house, you could not make it more non-conforming by adding on any direction. We changed that, like I stated, to allow for 25% addition to a non-conforming house. And the line, whether it goes through the kitchen, the living room, whatever, the whole house, to me, back in the day, the whole house was non-conforming.
We don't,
And you
we don't
could-
say that in our regulations, though, now. We don't make that statement in the
Yeah,
regulation.
I don't know. I'm just going back with conversations with Gail and many other land use people that any portion was non-conforming, the whole thing is non-conforming.
I think the question is that in this 310.7.2, we're saying that it can go, as part of the regulation that states that residents can add to a non-conforming dwelling. But the question here is where the addition would be. So,
If it goes, like the lateral part, if it goes away from the non-conformity, back or sideways, I suppose, you're not going to add on in within the 50-foot setback,
Right.
you have to go back away or up. But if the right and left is outside of the 50 feet, I can see how that can be written in. I have no problem with that. But the 25% is going to stick.
Sure.
Right, exactly.
I think, Jim, that you're saying, just very clearly what you're saying is what this says.
It already says it, so
I
that's,
think so.
we're just
Yeah.
checking, to see if that's what it says.
You know, I'm trying to picture a 25% lateral expansion, but it's possible. 25% is small, like Greg said, but that's what we meant it to be, to not change the look of the streetscape that much. And that's why we're doing it. It's a small change, so it doesn't disrupt the community. I didn't mean this regulation to save old homes and let people put on 5 more bedrooms, like some people were talking about, just to retain the house. They're non-conforming houses close to the road. We're giving the owners just a small option to make life easier on them.
Well, our 25% is not in question, is not threatened.
No,
No.
I'm not suggesting it's
You know,
other than 25%.
It's basically protected and sacred because
I think I confused you on that,
it's
sorry.
nothing relative to that. So
Okay, I'm
I
good.
think your interpretation is exactly as this is written. And, you know, in an interpretation by, I'm not a lawyer, but courts of law, interpretation is as written. You know, and what you're doing, you're saying this is as written. You've made your statement as something that's written. So I agree with you, Jim.
We're good.
Chris, yeah,
No, I'd agree.
Well, at some point, we just have to make it seems like a very simple thing, but it is interesting. And we've been asked for a clarification. And how do we do that? But we talk about it and we have decisions and we vote on it. And if we're at that point right now, we can do that.
Is it necessary to vote on it?
We have to have a consensus.
Oh, okay.
Because right now, we all think we agree, but we don't really know. So Greg would like to walk out with a consensus.
yeah, and it's our job to do that.
And we can do a consensus. We can make a motion to vote. To interpret Roxbury zoning regulations non-conforming section 3-7-2 to allow lateral expansion of a non-conforming dwelling outside the setback. So we can vote on that right now. And prior to that, Jim was saying that when we vote for or against something, we don't have to say why we vote for something. We have to have a consensus among ourselves, a statement. Is that correct?
It's just one statement.
One statement from all of us, not from each one of us, like
Correct.
we were
Yes.
corrected a couple months ago. So if there's no more discussion, okay, we can vote on a consensus. Good, so, yes,
No, I'm good with that.
Jim?
Certainly.
Okay, so we'll need a motion to interpret Roxbury zoning regulation non-conforming section 3-10-72 to allow lateral expansion of a non-conforming dwelling outside the setback. I need a motion.
No more than 25%, like it says.
Right.
Right. Yes,
Definitely.
that doesn't change, this motion does not change 3-10-7-1, which comes before it.
Yep.
Right. Okay.
25% is gospel at this table right now.
Yes.
All right, so I need a motion. I read it a couple times myself. I still can't read it. Can I make a motion?
I don't think so.
I can't.
No,
No,
Why not?
you can't.
I'm tired, but if you give me that piece of paper, that'll help.
Okay, read that sentence right there. Because that's what we're voting on.
Underline.
Thank you.
You know, maybe it's as simple as saying it's the consensus of the commission that a lateral expansion.
We're good. Hang on.
Oh, you've got something. I'm sorry.
I'd like to propose a motion to interpret the non-conforming section regarding 310.72 to allow lateral expansion of a non-conforming dwelling outside of the setback. This is an interpretation by the commission.
You've just made that motion.
Yes.
Okay,
Is
so
there a
we have a
second?
motion. I need that paper back, Elaine. So we have a motion. And we need a second.
I'll second it.
Chris Hegarty seconds the motion. Now, just before we vote on it, we can once again discuss the motion. We've made a motion, it's been seconded. Is there any more discussion on this motion before we vote?
I'm good.
No, Jim?
I'm good.
Okay, all right, so it's been moved and seconded, and all in favor of this motion?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right, so the consensus of we as a Roxbury zoning commission, that lateral expansion of a non-conforming dwelling will be allowed outside the setback.
Per
Or the-
per all other regulations. Permitted.
Yes, as stated.
Okay,
Yeah, I think that's clear from what you said.
what's that?
I think that's clear from what your motion is.
That's clarification enough for you?
Yeah, I think that's enough.
Well, and for others, yeah, okay.
You want to just specify all other regulations need to be conformed to?
Well, I think it's.
Pertaining to all regulation.
Okay,
Yeah, that's fine.
it's
all right.
fine.
Thank you so much for giving me a listen. I
That made me
appreciate that.
sweat.
No, I think it was important to hear John. I think important to hear Greg and for the commission. And there's a lot of history here.
Right.
Well, we worked on that. We worked hard on that.
Yeah.
You know, this town has more old houses than many around in New England. And of course, New Englanders, we must have been really cheap here, because that's why the old houses are still here. No one wanted to build a new one, spend the money to build a new one. But I'll tell you one thing, this is a gem. It is a gem. I mean, to think that there's almost 200 antique houses in Roxbury out of maybe 900 or 1,000 houses in town. That's an amazing tally. I mean, thank you for much for helping us keep them here.
Well, this regulation came originally from Jim coming and doing the research, so.
Well, because there's nothing worse than having these old houses completely blown up so that they just don't resemble anything anymore. So this
Yeah.
regulation allows these to continue to be relevant and occupied. Because I looked at most of the old houses and most of them are under 1,000 square feet, the original house.
Yeah.
And some of them only 500-600. So it's they're little,
Yep.
and this gives them a chance to be relevant. So thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you.
Mike?
Dan.
Dave, Dan.
I won't ever
Three,
get it.
he had three chances in the group.
It's in the Mike, Dave, Dan sort of
You're
zone
on
of just
Moose
comment.
Horn?
Moose Horn,
Did you
yeah.
just move there or you?
No, I've been there 9 years.
Oh.
Uh,
How
But
come I haven't- how
we
come
got
I
young
didn't know
kids
that?
now, so
Keeping a low profile.
yeah, we got three bedrooms and now we're gonna put the fourth in, and the grandparents want the rent downstairs bathroom, so we can make room for it
Good.
rather than going up the back.
Grandparents, or that's a significant word.
It is, it's important to have.
A lot of grandparents here.
When we bought the house 9 years ago, there was just two of us. It was perfect. And now one extra little space. This is nice.
This is one of the ways we can help get people to town, young people with children. And I think it's important to do that because
All right.
one example, so.
Thank you.
We got a meeting to run here. We got important stuff to do.
Thanks, John. Thanks, John.
John, thanks for standing by.
Oh, no problem whatsoever. No big deal.
I guess that-
Lost my agenda. There it is. All right, next on the agenda is a review of, a workshop. Council of Governments, the Northwest Hills Council of Governments Workshop that Elaine, Candy, Kim and I attended. And I don't have my notes, but you have some notes, Kim. It was an interesting workshop. It was an interesting building and an interesting mural. And it was a pleasant workshop to take part in. And it was conducted by Michael Ziska, who is a very well-respected authority on zoning, planning regulations. So he spoke to us, enlightened us. A lot of the stuff we knew. Elaine, did you take notes?
A little bit.
You want to just review what?
Oh, have Kim start. That would be,
All right, Kim.
I'm just opening up.
Sure, yeah. These are really cryptic, but he pretty much went through the PA 21-29, that new legislation that that had come up a couple of years ago, and clarified some things. And he really took the stance. He was very, it was interesting to hear him because he questioned a lot of the way in which some of this legislation was written, and made us think twice about some things that we weren't going to opt out of. And that's why the accessory apartment opt-out is listed here, because he was concerned the way some of these things listed were very ambiguous. And he encouraged, whenever you have an opportunity to opt out, to do it, so that you're not locked into the legislation as stated when the date comes, which in this case is January 1st. So you get it lock, stock, and barrel. Even if you're doing it, you may not be doing it exactly the way it's stated. And for two lawyers, one our town attorney and the other Ziska, who is a very well-known land use attorney, both of them go, I don't know what that means. So we kind of went, oh, I guess we should really think about that. So that was very enlightening. And that's sort of my introduction to the next thing on the agenda. But he talked about, but I mean, he went through each thing. So I don't know if we, but we are doing a really pretty good job for the town of Roxbury. We've already passed an ordinance for canvas. We are a really good place for the accessory apartments that we'd already approved more than what was required by the state. A suggestion was made that somewhere in our zoning regulations, do we have an appendix that lists the things that we've opted out of? And I don't think we have that. I looked in there and I don't believe there is a place where it shows that we've opted out. And I was like, that's actually a good idea. Like those granny pods, those. So we did that. And then we have the parking that we opted out of, and then we'll do the accessory apartments. So at least those will be listed with the dates.
Well, he said it's better to be safe than sorry.
Yeah.
Just opt out.
Yeah,
When in doubt, just opt out.
right. That's what he said.
And, he did say something interesting. I thought it was kind of amusing. It's psychologically kind of amusing. He said that with our ADU, our accessory unit dwelling units, he said that technically they are duplexes.
Well, he did actually.
He said they're
When they're-
duplexes. Now, duplex to me is something that's not very pretty or very attractive, but a duplex is a building with two units in it that the owner doesn't have to occupy. And our accessory dwelling unit doesn't have to be owner occupied. And all three of the units don't have to be owner occupied in our ADU. So that's got nothing to do with it. I just thought it was an interesting thing that, psychologically, we look at duplexes as a bad thing, but
We already have, sort of.
Multifamily.
Yeah,
Well, multifamily is there's a definition for that.
Yes, there is, and
So-
I checked on it.
Okay.
Okay. Duplex and triplex are considered multifamily. In the state of Connecticut, anything with 3 units
3 units.
is considered multifamily. And I asked that question because I felt it was really important to consider the scale of Roxbury and to consider some of the proposals were mandates. How we could best utilize or satisfy the requirements without imposing on the town. And that was one important factor that I considered. So we're talking, it might be, as Bill said, the suggestion of a duplex or a triplex, well done, it would not be revealing as multifamily housing, which would preserve the rural character,
Right.
Site characteristics.
site
Bad word now, right?
characteristics, thank you. So I felt that was important.
He basically, as he spoke, indirectly gave Roxbury quite a nice pat on the back
Yeah, he
a
did.
lot of times.
Yeah.
So,
And Jim,
thank
you and
Jim.
I have gone to these meetings too, and Elaine too, right? And
Yep.
Roxbury
Yes.
does get cited for, not cited, but applauded for being ahead of the game on quite a bit.
Recognized, yeah.
Yeah.
And
All right.
the other thing he mentioned is regs on short-term rentals are still really up in the air.
Mhm.
Yes.
All right, so you have any more comments about our meeting, about our
No,
workshop?
I will say that it's a great opportunity to go. Then with this new fellow, what's his name? I wrote.
Ziska.
No, Rob
Oh,
Phillips, the
yeah,
head of the
Rob.
Northwest Hills Cog now. They're trying to do these destination meetings, and so it's not just in, the Cog location, but so where we were was in Winstead, the largest mural. The largest mural anywhere?
America's
In America?
mural project.
An old factory.
It's 120 feet long by 3 stories high, and it's all shaped, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And we could walk up 3 flights and have this whole long banister kind of area where you could view it from the different levels. It was beautiful. It was wonderful just to go there. I would have been happy just to see that, and then we had the meeting to boot, which was really nice. So.
The mural was in the back of the meeting. It was just,
Yeah.
I'm not an artist, but it
was
certainly impressed
spectacular.
me and I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
All right.
So anyway, I just want to say.
All right, so with that segues us right into opting out of accessory dwelling units, which I think we've talked about now, and we just better do it.
Yeah, so I don't know, was that, Karen, did you include that?
Next message from John Cody.
Oh, sorry, so Julie, sorry.
John left.
Yeah, that's all right. I put together, and I guess you guys maybe didn't get it, but the Public Act 2129 about the, just so you could see what it said specifically about the accessory apartments. But, the first thing on it, oh, you do?
Sorry,
Okay.
Kim, yeah, that was included.
Oh, good, because I'm looking
Yeah,
at
I've
my
got
own
it.
I think it
document.
was probably the last item, if you
Oh,
have it
okay.
in your
I know, there was
packet.
a lot on there, sorry.
There was a lot. It's there.
I'm trying to look at the thing. So it was number C, it was 7C in particular. And when Gail McTaggart had sent this to us when this first came out. So it says a municipality shall not, 1, condition the approval of an accessory apartment on the correction of a non-conforming use structure or lot, or require the installation of fire space, blah, 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 not required. Okay, so it was the non-conforming, and she wrote, I don't know what this means. So it was the first part of that. So, once she started saying that, and then Diska started saying it, that's when we realized that we needed to come back to the commission, and we have a deadline. So the reason we're doing this now, we would have to agree to opt out, make a motion to opt out. We have a public hearing next month.
It's
And
close.
then once that's closed, then we agreed to opt out, and then it goes to the Board of Selectmen for December.
It's a
So-
selectmen meeting after our meeting,
Yes.
so it'll work out just
So it
right.
works out just right, because then, because I've already spoken to Patrick about it, so he understands what's coming in December. So then we don't have to take that to a town meeting. we found out from the attorney that
He
we can
was a
just,
selectman.
do that vote as selectmen. And so we'll be able to do that, and that's ahead of the January 1st deadline, when,
Good.
actually January 1st, when it goes into law.
There's no reason not to do it, period.
So, there really isn't. So, does
Can we-
anybody have
are
any
you-
questions? Do you have any
are you through that?
questions?
Are you through that?
I am, yes.
Jim, can you come back?
I'm here.
No, it would
We
be,
can't- There you go.
we couldn't see you until you talked.
Different view.
Oh, okay.
So I think, Julie, we're good with that. We can go
Okay,
back to.
Karen.
Great. I don't know who's doing it. Is it Karen or Julie? I'm not sure. Either one of you, it's all good. So,
So do we vote on
Yeah, so
opting
we-
out right now? We should make a motion.
I think we just have to, make a motion or vote up for a public hearing. Karen, is that right?
Sorry, I was muted. I think the last time when we did the parking, we made a motion to opt out. Oh, no, wait a minute. We made a motion to do the public hearing. Because we
Right.
can't do that until after we hear the public comment.
Right.
You're right, Kim.
Okay. So we just at this point take a vote to bring it to public hearing.
Right. Or someone makes a motion to bring it to public hearing.
A motion?
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to bring it to public hearing. To opt out of I make a motion to bring to public hearing the option to opt out of Connecticut Public Act 2129, which refers to accessory dwelling units, ADUs.
Section 6,
Second.
right? All in favor?
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Hear that phone ring?
Yes,
It says it's off.
I'm hearing it from your ear.
it's your
You're
ears.
hearing my ears?
Yeah.
My earphones are taking control of my
But I
life.
don't think, maybe they can't. I can only, we can, because you're right next to you.
Yeah,
It's okay, don't worry.
Okay,
Your head's ringing.
it was loud. Where were we? We had a vote?
We
Yeah.
had vote.
Voted.
All in
Favor?
Unanimous.
Aye.
All
We
five.
had a second. Okay.
All right, so.
So that was unanimous, I think, wasn't it?
yes.
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 Thank you.
So
Good.
that's it. It's in Karen's hands.
All right, good. So now we're at purpose.
All right. Next on the agenda is ongoing review of zoning regulations, section 1 purpose. What,
Public Act 2129, section 1.
yeah, section 1, yeah. What's left to do? You know, we,
I think we just, yeah,
at the workshop, we learned that, well, we're opting out of what we can opt out of, but section 1 purpose, we can't opt out of. We have to accept it, do we not?
we do.
And just incorporate it into our regulations as section 1, and we're just
Yep.
using the as written from Hartford.
And we've changed, there's some things that are changed, like there's stuff that's from Long Island Sound that's not on here because it doesn't have to do with us. There are certain things that aren't included.
Or is it by assume that we don't, it doesn't have to do with us? Does
It doesn't. This is actually from Gail. What we have here is what Gail gave us.
Yeah,
So she has taken out what's irrelevant for Roxbury.
all right, so what Gail gave us is,
What page is purpose on?
No, was that included again?
I don't think it was. No, it wasn't. We probably should have, but
I didn't think about it.
it
Sorry.
was that whole big long memo that Gail originally gave us last February, I believe.
yeah, we started going through it one by one.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Should we review that whole thing again next month, or how do you want to do it?
There's no pressure.
Yeah, but we should.
There's no deadline on this part? Okay.
Well, no, not a strict
We don't
deadline.
have to accept it by the January deadline. Okay.
So
Is this the one that if we don't accept it, we jeopardize state funding or?
I think it has to do with state funding.
actually, what we learned with Ziska the other night was that our risk wasn't funding. Our risk was having our regulations decided by a court, not by us. Remember? He said if we don't adhere to these regulations that have been
Oh,
proposed,
yes, he said it. That's right.
that our risk is not funding. Our risk is being taken to court and have a court decide how our regulations are interpreted.
But is that any different than how our regulations have been interpreted in the past?
Well, we have with a clear set of purpose, because purpose starts at the beginning and then everything else builds on that. And purpose, when I was talking to Gail about it, she said that section 1 has always been taken from the Connecticut state statutes on zoning, because every town has to abide by what the state says.
Okay.
And then from there, we developed our regulations, to fit our town, but still following these guidelines.
So what I'm asking is purpose being redefined by 2129, and
Yes.
that's our issue.
It is,
And so
It is.
that's,
It
and
becomes a mandate.
yes,
It automatically becomes a mandate.
correct.
2129 goes from public or House HR or public act to mandate.
but I believe that Mike also cautioned us to understand that all of the language in 2129 is ambiguous. And therefore, I don't believe that
That's right.
we have to
He did
mandate.
say that.
We do not have to mandate what they tell us. And I would err on the side of caution on that and stick to what Roxbury knows.
Yeah, he did also explain that it was written very generically by an urban type mentality.
But I think if you read through, I think we need to do that again, and that's what's really important. Read through what she gave us, and maybe Karen, maybe we could send that out again, even before the next meeting, and enough time for people to spend some time with it.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that.
And to take a look, because when you read through it and you go through each one, you realize that it is actually general enough so that Roxbury can interpret to fit. And a reminder that when I checked with Gail, I'm looking at it now, so I'm looking down at my computer. Everywhere it says to protect, to provide, to promote, and anything that has to do with housing, that our affordable housing plan answers those questions. So because we have done that, we have already kind of covered ourselves in a lot of this. I think that's important to remember. And that was a big relief, actually, when she said that. I was like, oh, okay, good. Not that it's the end all be all for it, but it is something that we can, if somebody does say, well, you're not doing that. Well, we are starting that process, and we have done that, and the town has accepted it. So I think that's important. But I think it's important that we all read it through carefully before the next meeting, so that
Well, we
we
can
understand.
seriously have it on next month's agenda.
Yeah, because next month we already have 2 public hearings. It's going to be fast, but it takes some time.
Right.
So we've got the pizza place, and then we've got the ADU, and then we can talk about, does that make sense? We can
Yeah,
talk
well,
about
I mean, it'd be nice
purpose and
to,
be done with it if we can.
we don't want to talk about it a night like tonight because we're tired
It's
of
already,
the meeting.
it's already quarter to
Yeah.
9.
And
It's
there's a
quarter to 9,
game? Is
so,
there a game?
yeah,
No,
Yes.
it's Tuesday.
so
There is a
All right.
game.
does that make sense?
Sure,
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay, so I will get that out fairly soon after the meeting and give everyone a chance to review it again.
All right. All right, so next item, agenda chairman's comments. I don't have any. I've said enough already. Communications or no communications, are there, Karen?
Not tonight.
All right, now, the next item on the agenda, we need a drum roll. A drum roll? Adjournment.
I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hey,
Hey, and this
job.
was our first hybrid meeting.
yeah,
This
worked
was
out okay.
good. This went,
Well,
It went
well
well.
done,
yeah, it was
well
good.
done.
Very good. It was very easy to hear and see
Yeah,
and
well, that's fun.
Good.
everything
Yeah,
worked
that
out
was,
well.
We were all here.
Yeah, it was,
that
yeah.
was a question.
Oh, well, one of the alternates was,
Somebody was on there.
yeah, someone was on
Cheryl and
last.
Candy?
Alan, wasn't here.
No, Alan wasn't here, and
Alan.
Cheryl and Candy.
They called in, they.
Cheryl and Candy couldn't be here tonight, they said, both of
But
them.
you guys could hear everything that we said?
Yes,
Absolutely.
Greg was
Very-
talking and all. of
Very
these-
clear. Yep.
Oh, good.
We
Okay.
could even see Greg holding up pictures.
Oh, okay, great. Excellent.
good night
Hear my
all.
phone ringing?
Okay, good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Did I say the meeting's adjourned after we voted on
I
it?
think you did.
Yeah.
You can always say it again.
Meeting's adjourned.
Stay well all. Bye.
Two.